In this episode, I'm going to break down how you can achieve your launch goals. So let's dive in. Let's talk about how you can guarantee you reach your launch goals and make it as easy as possible. Before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you. We've gotten a lot of support and a lot of just kind words about the recent launch episodes saying how much it's helped people. So if you sent me a message, thank you so much. It honestly makes my day, and it's the reason why I keep doing this. So thank you if you reached out. And also for folks that ask questions, I am so excited to answer some of them in a couple weeks because there's some really good questions. And as you listen to this episode and even next week's episodes, if you have more questions, keep sending them in because I want to have a really good meaty Q&A episode. So let's talk about your launch goals. I know a lot of you might have big, hairy, audacious launch goals, and that's amazing. But a lot of the times you're like, okay, I have this $20K launch goal or $35,000 launch goal or whatever it is, and you're excited about it, but then it feels really daunting and insurmountable because you have no idea how to go from where you are right now to achieve your launch goal. And that's what I wanted to break down in this episode. So first and foremost, you might have heard me talk about this on the podcast before, but you need to make your launch logical versus emotional, especially if this is your first launch and this is the first time you're unveiling your brand, right? If you have a brand already and you have a new collection launch goal, this will still be incredibly important and valuable to you because you should be doing this for every launch. It's not just for the first time you launch your brand, but the next time you launch a new product or a new collection. This should be the process you go through. So you can save this episode and always just come back to it because this is something you should rinse and repeat every single time. First and foremost, you need to have your key performance indicators or KPIs. If your goal is to make $10,000 in revenue and your average product price is $100, then you know you need to sell roughly 100 products to make that goal. So that is step one. You know how many products you need to sell, and you basically just take your goal divided by your average price point of your product, right? And for your first collection launch, you should be launching with 1 or 2 products. I've talked about this before. If you have questions about it, I can answer in the Q&A episode around why, but you should only have 1 to 2 products. And so if you have 1, then obviously the price point is just the price of that 1 product. But if you have 2, just take an average. So if one of them is a t-shirt or a blouse, let's say, and it's $100, and then the other one is a dress and it's $200, then I would just take an average price point of $150 just for the sake of math, just make it easy. And then once you now know how much your goal is, what your average price point is, and then how many products you need to sell, then we need to figure out how you're going to sell those 100 pieces. So for my clients, when they're first starting out, most of them will make their sales at what I like to call our launch secret weapon, which is a launch event. And I can deep dive into launch events separately if you want as well, if that's something you're curious about. But essentially, a big portion of sales are made at the launch event, and then another portion of sales is made online on their website. And if I had to kind of estimate a split between the two, I would say about 80% of the sales are made in person at these launch events, and then the other 20 is made online. And so for you, it could be something similar. It could be a little bit different, but for the sake of your numbers right now, I would just take that 80-20 rule and apply it to your business. And then as you launch and as you grow and scale, you can take actuals. If this is not your first time launching your brand and you have actual raw data that you can use, then of course, use that in your business case. But as of right now, I would say let's use the 80% in person and 20% online just for the sake of this forecast. So again, we need to sell 100 products, and that means 80% of it will be sold in person, which equals 80 products will be sold in person, and then 20% or 20 products will be sold online. So let's look at the 80 first. For in-person launch events, a lot of my clients will see a higher than average conversion because I have structured it in such a way where my clients are able to sell, they get the right people in the room, and it's just so easy. So let's just assume a 25% conversion. Usually my clients see more, but again, we want to be conservative here. So let me pull up my calculator. So if we have 80 and the conversion is 25%, then that equates to needing at least 320 people that you're targeting that are at your launch event that are shopping, because of that 320 people, 25% are going to buy, which equates to 80 products, okay? And if the math is wrong, don't come at me, but that's what my calculator just spit out. So you know that you need to roughly have 320 people show up at your launch event. However, when you invite someone to a launch event, they may not show up and you need to account for that. And so for my clients, I always say like, let's assume there's like roughly a 50% show up rate. So that means that if you need 320 butts in your seat, you need to double that, which will make it 640. But let's just double check. Yes, 640. So 640 people, and I would just round that up and try to send out like 650 invites. And it is a bit gnarly to have 650 people show up at one event. So you can always split it up. I always get my clients to do at least like 2 launch events, maybe 3. So you can split that up so that you're inviting maybe like 250 per event. And so launch events are like a huge sales engine that I get my clients to do. And so that's the 80% of sales taken care of. You know that you now need to invite like 650-ish people. And the key is that it needs to be your ideal customer. It can't just be your friends and your family members. It needs to be people that would buy your products and find value in them. Okay, so that's the key there. And then with the 20% online sales with the 20 products, what you want to do is work backwards as well. So online, typically the conversion rate is way lower. And I would say if we're not working together and I'm not like optimizing a website, I'm not all over it, then I would probably assume like a 1 or a 2% conversion, like something really, really low. So let's pull up my calculator again. If you are needing to sell 20 products, and your conversion rate is 1%, let's just do that. That means you need to have 2,000 website hits. So 2,000 people need to be going to your website and they need to be browsing it. And then from that, you will likely have about like 20 sales from that. So just knowing that number will make it really helpful during your launch phase to figure out, okay, I need to have 2,000 people go on my site, and that means like every single day I need to be promoting, I need to be selling, I need to be pushing them to my site. And so that is how you reverse engineer your launch goal and you guarantee your success. Because if you just come out of the gate and you're like, hey, I want to make $10,000 and you just believe in yourself and that's it, and you don't know how you're going to get there, what the numbers look like you're just not going to guarantee that you're going to get there. And so in order to achieve it, again, let's walk this through again, right? Because I know sometimes it can be a bit confusing. You take your launch goal, you divide it by your average price, and then you figure out how many products you need. From that number, from the amount of products you need to sell, you're then going to split it into 80% being sold in person and then 20% of it being sold online. And then let's deal with the in-person sales first. So with that 80% of sales coming from in-person, you're going to divide it further and we're going to put like roughly a 25% conversion rate on it. If you want to be even more conservative, you could lower that to like 15 if you want as well. But honestly, I think 25% is good because we're going to assume you're going to have the right people in place. We're going to assume that you do a good job executing it. So let's put a 25% conversion rate on it. And from that, you will be able to figure out how many people you need in the room so that you can actually make that 80% of sales from your launch event. And then on top of that, you want to double it just because sometimes when you invite someone, they may not show up. So that's the breakdown for the in-person. And then for the online piece, the 20% of products that are coming from online, you want to take a 1 or 2% conversion rate to figure out the amount of website traffic you need. And so that's how you reverse engineer your launch goals. And then from these numbers, you then will figure out what you need to do. So now you know the amount of invites you need to send for your launch event, right? Now you also need to know how much website traffic you have. And then in order to break that down further, you then need to be like, okay, let's start with the website traffic stuff, right? You can say, okay, I think based on my community right now, the size there, we can take care of X amount of that traffic. If there's a gap or a delta, which there likely is, like let's pretend you have 1,000 people in your community and you need to get 2,000 website hits, you know you need at least like 1,500 more people, right? Because not everyone in your community might go onto your website. And so let's just aim for 1,500 more people because we want to be more conservative here. And so maybe like 500 of that comes from ads, 500 of that comes from influencers, and the remaining 500 comes from partnerships you do, right? Like you really want to break that down even further. And then once you have the like 500 from ads, 500 from influencers, 500 from partners, like start breaking it down even more. Like I'm partnering with this jewelry brand. From this jewelry brand, I think I can get like 50. I'm partnering also with this ethical shoe brand. With this shoe brand, I think I can get another 75. Like really dissect it and break it down even more. And then on the in-person side, same thing. Like really think through, okay, I have 1,000 people in my community, let's say, and I don't know, like 100 of them are in my area where the launch event would be. And I'm going to get each of them to bring like 4 friends or 5 friends. So that's like 500 people already. And then maybe I need to run some ads to get the delta. So you really need to start breaking it down. And then once you break it down, the launch goal is no longer so overwhelming and daunting because you have a plan to get there. And also the beauty is when you actually do launch and you're like, halfway through your launch and you haven't made, let's say, $5,000 or whatever 50% of your launch goal is, you can take a look at all this data and see what's going on. Because let's say, I don't know, maybe the website traffic stuff is going really, really well and you actually already have your 20% of sales, but then in person, you're noticing that people aren't really showing up to your event. And that's why you're not making the sales you need to because you don't have enough people in the rooms. And so then you know that maybe for your last event, you need to triple the amount of people that you need to invite, right? Like once you know what the goals are and what the KPIs are, once things go in motion, you can firefight accordingly and you can guarantee that you reach your launch goal because you know what problems to solve for. So it is so important you set your KPIs up. And I know that walking through this, it can be confusing. So I hope that I was able to walk you through it. If you do have any questions, ask them so then I can answer them in the Q&A episode. So have your launch KPIs and just know what your benchmark is for everything. And then as you're planning for your launch, you need to know what all the tasks are and when you need to do them. A rookie mistake I commonly see is that people prepare for their launch like the month before the launch or maybe even like 2 weeks before. And then it's like a mad scramble. And that is not the position I want you to be in. I want you to be able to enjoy your launch and not execute it from a place of burnout. And how you do that is by planning months and months in advance. I always get my clients to start planning for their launches at least 4 months in advance. And if you haven't heard, I recently released a new product, which is the Build Your Brand Blueprint. And in this blueprint, you're going to have the A to Z roadmap of exactly how you're going to achieve your launch goals and launch a profitable brand. Like everything you need to do so that nothing falls through the cracks, but you also know when to do things and the order to do things in. So in there, I have your entire launch broken down, like when you should be solidifying your launch venues, when you should be figuring out catering, when you should get your launch speech ready, and like all this stuff on top of like your product, your sourcing, your website, your marketing, like when you should start building your community, which is also, spoiler alert, sooner rather than later. So yeah, just make sure you give yourself enough time to do everything. And especially with your launch, list out everything you need to do so that nothing falls through the cracks. There's nothing worse than like scrambling, trying to figure out what you need to do for your launch while you're simultaneously launching and trying to meet your goal. Like that's just a recipe for disaster and for burnout. So pre-plan everything and start sooner rather than later. And if you want to get the Build Your Brand Blueprint, I highly recommend you get it this month because since we're launching it, you will be able to get $20 off with code LAUNCH. And that will make it just $28 for you, which is such a steal. So if you want to get it, visit recloseted.com/blueprint and use code LAUNCH. The code will only be available for this month only, and you will get $20 off. So really excited for you to leverage that tool because that will just make your launch so much easier. And in the blueprint too, I've linked resources as well so that you can get my strategy, whether it's like a YouTube video I did on it or a podcast episode or a masterclass I have or like a PDF, like you will have resources in there so I can handhold you every step of the way. And so, yeah, you want to make sure that you have your KPIs, you have your roadmap. And then when it comes to execution, you guys had a lot of questions around the pre-launch and the launch phase. And that is really important. I outlined it in the blueprint, but essentially you want to make sure there's a differentiation in your content and in your business kind of priority when it comes to your launch. Because as soon as you get closer to your launch, your priority and your brand's priority is to launch and make as much sales as you can. And so entering into the pre-launch phase, that's when you start to warm up your audience, you start to build that buzz, you start to make sure people are excited and counting the days to your launch. That's really the goal of the pre-launch. And then when it comes to the actual launch, you want to shout it from the rooftops. You want everyone to be aware of it. In terms of the launch events, usually they happen at the end of the pre-launch, and then there's a couple that happen during your launch phase. But it's also up to like what you think you can handle from a bandwidth perspective. And I kind of talk about that in the blueprint. So the launch phase is when you launch. People can buy things, you're selling every day, you're promoting every day, and that's what that is. So that is a really important differentiation, because I think a lot of people will just do like their business as usual content. They'll promote normally and then all of a sudden they just launch and then it's done, right? So that's such a big mistake, and it's a missed opportunity not to warm up your audience, not to get them hyped up and ready to buy. And then also when you do launch, don't just talk about it on the first day. Like, I want you to launch over 2 weeks so that you can make as many sales as possible. And so that's kind of the overview. And the final tip I have for you, which is so important, is to also do a post-mortem when your launch is done, because you are not just going to launch this one time. You're going to continue to launch, and the first launch you have is going to be overwhelming. It's going to be stressful because it's your first time doing something, right? And so you want to take and capture all your learnings, all your lessons, so that next time you can look back on your postmortem and then you don't have to start back from square one. You can be like, okay, last time I did this that I think was really successful, so I'm going to do it again. Or you could be like, hey, last time I did this and it flopped, so we're not going to do that again. You need to have those notes. So after your launch is done, I highly recommend you just sit down for like a half a day, open up a Google Doc and just like brain dump everything that happened, like everything you want to kind of keep the same for next time, everything you would change next time, ideas you have for next time. For my clients, I get them to actually do this like every single day throughout the pre-launch and the launch. I get them to reflect so that by the end they can put this together. So if that's something you want to do as well, you can do that too. But at the bare minimum, do this at the end of your launch so that you have this for future launches as well. And there you have it. That's how you guarantee you reach your launch goals, and you also make it as effortless as possible. A lot of it is pre-planning and being so intentional from the get-go, because if you have a plan, if you have a roadmap, if you know exactly what you need to do, all you need to do is execute. You just need to execute, make sure you do it really intentionally, and then, yeah, you'll be able to effortlessly reach your launch goals. So I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, leave it on this YouTube video. You can go to youtube.com, search up Recloseted, comment any questions, and I will answer it in the Q&A episode. I'm so excited for you to launch your brand, and if you want the blueprint, you can get it at recloseted.com/blueprint.